Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Politics Now, which is about modern politics in modern America. And today, we're going to be discussing why neoconservatism isn't only dying within the Republican Party, but within America, and how the 2024 Republican primary is really the ultimate death blow to neoconservatism, not only within the Republican Party, but in a broader sense. So, let's get into it. And Trump, he is doing pretty well. He is at an all-time high, and all of his new conservative opponents and Ramaswamy, he's sort of just staying there where he is. He's pretty much just going for a cabinet position, and he's really the only other non-neoconservative candidate here. And all the other people who are full rhinos and neoconservatives, DeSantis, he's not doing great. All the other ones are pulling below 5%, and they're really not moving at all. They've stayed relatively at the same spot for the entire race. They might go up a point and then down a point and then up a point, but really they've stayed the exact same. DeSantis, he's fallen so much. He's turned his back on his base, where a lot of people who like Trump, they also like DeSantis, and he just completely abandoned those people. And well, now we get to see how that worked out, and he's now polling at 12%, which uh, he's not going to win the nomination, definitely. That's for sure. It's pretty likely that he doesn't win any state, and given the fact that he is the main proponent of neoconservatism, and he's basically the figurehead for the movement, and what remaining embers of actual power that it still has within the Republican Party, it saving neoconservatism within the Republican Party basically was hinging on DeSantis or one of these other candidates winning the nomination. And none of them have been proven to actually have any opportunity of winning. And DeSantis, he's looking like he's not going to win, so they're abandoning him for somebody like Nikki Haley. She went up for a little bit and then she just kind of plateaued. So she clearly isn't going to work. And if she continues this, they're probably going to go on to Mike Pence. They have a line of backups and backups and backups, and they're going to keep using them until they find somebody that works. And they're probably not, because looking at all the candidates, they're all fucking garbage. I mean, you got people like Chris Christie, which just no one is going to pick Chris Christie as their main nomination. Nobody in their right mind wants to see a President Christie outside of the 2% of people who unironically support him. He will be memed and beaten by Trump until he loses the nomination, if he gets anywhere close to actually having a chance. And Mike Pence, no, he's pretty much destroyed any bonds that he has with Trump, which, yeah, you're not going to win any Trump voters now. And just on his own campaign and on his own remarks, after that clip with Tucker, it's gone downhill far, way more. And that debate performance was also pretty shit. So Mike Pence, he's not going to go anywhere. Nikki Haley isn't going anywhere. Chris Christie's not going to go anywhere. Tim Scott, eh, he might go somewhere, maybe like 5% or 7% at the most, but Tim Scott, he's kind of just the middle of the road candidate. He's just kind of the candidate that you pick if you don't like anybody else, because he's pretty bland. He doesn't really offend anybody that much. I mean, he's still a relatively neocon kind of guy, but he just doesn't really have a backbone at all, and he doesn't really perform that awfully well, especially this primary. He just sort of sat out the debate and just stood there. He didn't really talk at all. And that's pretty much been his whole campaign direction, where he just kind of does nothing and hopes that eventually they'll get to him as the backup and then push him. And since he didn't offend anybody or turn anybody away, he can somehow sort of pull in everyone and win the nomination that way, which that's not going to work at all. And Tim Scott just kind of sitting there and doing nothing, that's going to make him an even easier target to be dogged on by Trump and probably Ramaswamy, because Ramaswamy is extremely loyal to Trump because he wants that cabinet position or vice presidency, and he's going to do everything he can to win over the support of Trump. And any debate that Trump is not at, Ramaswamy is basically going to be representing Trump. So Trump is basically attending every single event just through the lens of Ramaswamy. So Ramaswamy is pretty much the only candidate outside of Trump that's actually winning because he's proving himself to be a relatively good guy and a relatively nice politician. And Trump is going to like that, and he's probably going to pick him for his cabinet, probably not for his vice presidency. He has other people that he could probably pick, and they would probably be a way better candidate and a way better running rate. So he needs a new running mate, and Trump is probably not going to pick any of these people because Trump, he doesn't really like neoconservatism, and he has been trying so hard to get rid of it, and he's been pretty successful at that because essentially neoconservatism, it survived throughout the 80s and 90s, was completely destroyed by the 2000s by George Bush, and after that it was pretty much it's just a dead corpse. It's like beating a dead corpse. And Trump just completely sucker punched that bitch. And now it's a dead corpse that has been beaten and beaten and beaten. And now it's on fire. And Trump is going to throw even more gasoline on it. So, neoconservatism within the Republican Party, they don't really have any support anymore. They can't really pull any significant base. And when they do, they always manage to lose support because a majority of the party now is non neoconservatism, and they are more likely to vote for populist candidates like Ramaswamy and Trump. They like that populist angle, and they don't like the neoconservative angle, especially since neoconservatism over the past decade has become more and more liberal, and they basically are just kind of rhinos, which that's also a term that has been completely changed, where it used to be just your average describing your average Republican who liked George Bush's policies. Now it's an insult. It's an insult to call a Republican politician a rhino, and that's really a lot what a lot of these people are. They're rhinos. They are just complete neocons who they they're not even real conservatives. They just kind of bend and squish, and they have low taxes. Yippee! It's not like every single Republican promises low taxes. And if you compare this to 2016, Trump actually had serious competition for the nomination. He wasn't walking away with it like he has now. He had to fight really, really hard. He was being beaten by a lot of people for a while, when he was just starting, was being beaten by pretty much everyone, and then he rose, and then Ben Carson overtook him for a little bit, and he kept rising, but he still had pretty serious competition. And the neoconservatives, they still had a pretty sizable chunk of the vote compared to Trump. And even when the primary ended and Trump won the nomination, he still had a relatively large chunk of the nomination field where they were neoconservatives, or either they supported Trump, but I mean, they were still neoconservatives. And as soon as he lost 2020, they immediately flipped to become his enemy, or they supported Ted Cruz or Kasich. And all these people, if you take the vote share of those types of people, they made up the majority of the Republican Party, and it was a pretty decent majority. Now they're basically floundering, and just looking at the results of 2016, Trump couldn't even win most of the states. He had a decent share of the states, but he still had to win a lot of the states where he didn't win a ton of them, but he won a pretty decent share. He still had serious competition. He couldn't win in a lot of these states, even though it was incredibly close, but still, he lost a lot of states. And comparing that to 2020 or 2024 will most likely be where he's winning every single state, it was definitely a different story. And neoconservatism, it still had enough support that it could win a lot of these major states like Texas, Iowa, Ohio, even Maine. These are major states that you need to win to actually have any sort of support. And the Ted Cruz neoconservatives, they were able to win these states, and even other people were able to take large shares of the votes away from Trump. And now they're pretty much floundering at every opportunity. Most of these people, they would be lucky to get even one delegate in most of these states because that's pretty much all they're getting. And DeSantis, he'd be lucky to even get maybe 10% of a lot of these more Trump friendly states. And even in places like Florida, he'd be lucky to get at least 30% of the vote because if the average for most of the states is most likely going to be 20% for DeSantis, and that's a relatively pro DeSantis margin where you could probably have it be as low as maybe 7%. And that's the best case scenario for DeSantis is 20% on average, which doesn't win you any state. And even places like Florida and Utah, it's not going to win you anything. And if neoconservative candidates have this massive loss for the third time in the row, yeah, it's really going to kill off the ideology as a major part of the Republican Party. It's already been burning, it's already been crashing. 2024 is going to mark the final death of it, and it will be pretty much completely eradicated once if Trump wins the White House. And if he does, he's going to be working his ass off to get rid of that. And by 2028, it's going to be a pretty insignificant part of the Republican Party. And most of them are just going to be liberal Republicans, which will probably just vote Democrat anyways and leave the Republican Party. So populism is here to stay, and it is replacing neoconservatism within the Republican Party. And the Republican Party is going to keep shifting towards Trump style populism, and it's only going to be more ingrained as more populist candidates end up winning the nomination with a growing vote share of the populist poll within the Republican Party. And Trump is leading that headway, and he is leading the movement towards populism and neoconservatism. It's divided among a ton of candidates, and they really can't do anything to go against Trump because he has such a unified and unique vision compared to all these other people who essentially need to distinct themselves while remaining loyal to the Republican Party establishment and sort of distancing themselves from the George Bush campaign and his cabinet. And that's really hard to do because modern neoconservatism is literally the George Bush cabinet. So you can't really do that. And you can't eat your cake and have it too. So most of these people, they just end up being a complete mess. And DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, Tim Scott, all of these people are complete messes and they're going to spell the death for the ideology that they represent. So if you think neoconservatism maybe could survive, leave them in the comments below. Just given the trends now, it's probably not going to survive. It's going to be a pretty insignificant part of the Republican Party, maybe 5% of the vote share at most. But yeah, if you think populism will overtake the Republican Party and the Republican Party will most likely move towards more Trump style politics, leave them in the comments below. I'm sure we're going to have a calm and educated discussion. No, we aren't. Okay. Just no. I know how the comment section is going to work, and either nobody is going to comment or uh, it's going to be a complete bloodbath down there. That's what I'm expecting. So leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.